Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Yay, we've made it.
We made it. Oh my God. So much stress, but everything is fine.
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's joined already. We will wait a few minutes until 4 o'clock before we get going properly. So for the next couple of minutes, we'll just talk
Just
about
chill
random
out.
stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got my peanut hat on today, which, fun fact, was bought in Amsterdam in the first ever peanut butter shop, where they sold peanut butter that tasted like fried onions, which sounds weird and gross, but was actually really good. They also had, what are those waffles with the really thin ones? Stroop waffle flavored peanut butter. Isn't that interesting? So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. That is cool. In response to the question in chat, sorry, I'm not like just
You're
dismissing
like,
you.
anyway,
Like that is
weird
interesting, but
story, but
also,
thanks.
um, no. In response to the question in chat, we are going to be uploading the VOD from this to our YouTube channel, which is
Yes.
just youtube.com/. I think it's at Safe in Our World now, isn't it? Because they've all got ats in them.
Yes.
But we'll also be putting the link in and the slides as well in the Discord, so everyone will be able to have everything.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, if anyone has issues with sound or anything, please let us know now, and we can fix it before we start. But all things look good on my end, so fingers crossed, everything should go smoothly, or as smoothly as it can.
Yeah.
Also, thank you so much for everyone who's following us as well. That's very nice. We do often stream here. I say often, like once a month, but when we do, they're usually like community panels, things like that, where we talk about loads of different mental health related topics. So you're always welcome back to come and tune into one of those.
Yeah, we'll also be streaming all of the Game Dev Champions masterclasses here. A full schedule for those will be up as soon as possible. We're just finishing up dates with most of the other folks.
Yes, we do have one coming up on the 20th of June with Harriet Frailing, which will be looking at accessibility and how to incorporate more accessible mechanics and things into your games, which I think will be a really good one.
Yes.
Harriet is amazing, so please do tune in for that as well. But yeah, I mean, we could get started if you like, since it's now 3 o'clock.
Yes, that sounds good. So, I mean, as everyone here is probably aware from the screen and also the promotion about this, the first masterclass we wanted to do as part of the Mental Health Game Dev Champions event is around burnout. While it's not specifically related to sort of tangibly developing a game, it is something that we are very conscious of. I mean, being a mental health charity, of course, but also being people who function in the games industry. As we'll go on to talk about, this industry is quite uniquely susceptible to issues like burnout. So we thought it would be a really important thing to discuss. I think particularly as well because this is a longer development window than some jams where you'll work really hard for a couple of days, but then you'll obviously be kind of done and be able to have a break. We just wanted to make sure that everyone had this moment to have a think about how they might prioritize their well-being over the next few months, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that being said, we'll get into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is just what is burnout. I won't labor the point here because I think it is a phrase that a lot of people are familiar with. I think it's unfortunately something that a lot of people have experienced. But I do think it's important to just kind of reset and actually look at the definition initially. So as you can see on the slide, it says that burnout is a state of complete physical and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged periods of stress. Now, what that means is that it's not just, oh, I had a bit of a stressful week, or today's been really, really intense. It is about that being drawn out over a long period of time. It's also not something that is exclusively related to work, which is how it is often described in a lot of contexts. It's obviously related to, sort of I suppose, like outside of work, like this game jam is, but you can also burn out on things in your social life, and you can burn out on hobbies and all this kind of stuff, because it is just about being kind of unable to escape from something for that period of time, being constantly engaged with it. And then, yeah, it leads to the mental exhaustion. But as we'll go on to discuss a little bit more in the next couple of slides, it's also about the impact that it has on your body, which I think people don't really acknowledge and don't really talk about very much when it comes to burnout. But it can have some extremely significant physical manifestations as well. You can also see on the slide there, there's a list of the top 3 causes of burnout according to a survey from 2019. Now, this does look mostly at burnout in the workplace, but there are things that we can learn from this that apply to stuff like developing a game and like participating in jams. So pressure for a start, whether you're doing it solo or as part of a team, there will be periods of pressure. That can be external pressure, so things like deadlines. But it could also be pressure that you put on yourself, I suppose, and sort of high expectations and things like that. You can see as well the second point there being workload. So having to work too much, having to put in overtime, and not taking appropriate leave or breaks. That'll be a big thing that we talk about as we come to the end and we look more about tips for managing things. But burnout really does revolve around that kind of extended stress without reprieve, without breaks, without taking time out. And so that's going to be a really big factor in when it comes to like actually managing burnout. And then number 3 being not supported in my role. Again, that is more looking at, sort of the workplace and maybe not having enough guidance from leadership and things like that. But it is something that people may feel in this, whether it's a case that there's not enough communication within the team, or if it's someone who is developing by themselves and they sort of feel like they don't have anyone, which we will come to talk about in a bit more detail. But I just think it's important to kind of be cognizant of those main causes and thinking about how those might manifest for you in the work that you have planned out over the coming months, basically. But I'll pass over to Rosie, who can talk us through a little bit about the symptoms.
Yeah, so I think what we've kind of established already is what burnout can look like, or what technically it is. But ultimately, I think one of the most important things that we can do when it comes to burnout is actually recognizing it, and especially recognize it in yourself, because it can look different to different people. And so just because you might have certain like different signs of burning out doesn't, oh, hello mushroom, doesn't mean that any of them are less valid. So obviously I don't want to just like read out the words on the slide, but they yes, there is a cat, his name is Mushroom, he is starving and apparently it's nearly tea time. um but the signs for burnout essentially can look honestly quite similar to some of the symptoms in depression, in my instance. But losing interest in hobbies and activities, feeling physically and emotionally exhausted, feeling alone, detached, hopeless, and essentially just being less functional as a human being. And that can also result in more anxiety. You can be disrupting your sleep pattern. So there's a lot of different experiences within burnout that can be tailored to your own response, I suppose. And if you've got something that you have experienced as part of burnout that's not on the slide, I'd highly recommend putting it in chat if you're comfortable with it, so we can talk about it as well. I think it's really important to share other experiences of burnout as well, and to try and basically make people feel less alone if they are experiencing these things. So for me, I want to share a little bit about my own personal story with burnout, just to kind of paint a small picture. I know Sky has experienced it as well. One of the biggest times I've ever burnt out, and honestly the main the main one was in 2020, just as the pandemic was starting, and my role was shifted quite a lot, and I ended up essentially working for months, but every day. Like I wasn't having weekends, and I wasn't really having lunch breaks, anything like that. So I would rock up about 8 a.m. I was moved into the center of the city to work there during the pandemic because we were doing some responses to the pandemic, and it was constant. And because, as Sky's already mentioned about some of the top causes of burnout, there was a lot of pressure because there was a worldwide pandemic. There was a lot of pressure because the work that I was taking part in was quite important to the medical response of the pandemic. And there wasn't really an awful lot of people who could help because obviously there was a lot of people getting sick. There was so much to do, and so few people to do it, and a lot of responsibility fell on my shoulders that I wasn't prepared for, and I wasn't particularly supported with. So that essentially led to a lot of difficult feelings, most of which are on this slide anyway. But it was a huge period of my life where I was just honestly like just a shell of a human being. Like, it was miserable. I didn't spot it until it was far too late, and I actually ended up leaving my role because of it, because it was too much. And so this isn't just a doom and gloom story. What we're trying to say is that there's a lot of different things you can experience within burnout. We will share some. I'm sure people in the chat will share some as well. But what we really want to take away from this is also some more practical tips on not only how to recognize burnout, how to avoid it, and then if it does happen, how to help yourself and help other people get out of it, because it is something that's very much, oh, we'll just go on holiday and you'll come back fine. And that's not the case. So I think sharing personal experiences is really important. Sky, did you want to share anything about your experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to comment. I'm not laughing at what you're saying. Obviously, it's very serious. I was just laughing because I could hear your cats playing in
Oh
the
God, I know
background.
they're
It's
playing in the
very funny.
tunnel, and I can't do
Um,
anything about it. They'll scream if I put them out. So I'm just trying to damage control here.
yeah. No, it's okay. I'm all for the cats being around. I do love Badger and Mushroom. But no, I mean, I I had, I guess, fairly similar experiences to you. There are two times in my life that I think I've experienced true burnout. And both of them are actually instances where I didn't know what I was experiencing was burnout until I got this job at Safe in Our World and we started talking about it more and I started learning more about it and actually recognizing it. Because I think, like a lot of people, burnout was a word that I'd heard thrown around, but I hadn't really thought about it in its context as this like actual serious thing that could happen to a person. Um, so the first instance was also around 2020, where I'd lost my job due to the pandemic and I was looking for work. And I guess I just thought there's no possible way that you can, get burnt out or overextend yourself when you're not even working. But that's not true because looking for work is extremely difficult. It's extremely challenging. Um, it requires a huge amount of mental energy, and also because I was unemployed, because of the huge amount of stress that comes alongside that I don't have time to get into right now. Um, it it felt like every second that I wasn't looking for work and applying for jobs was wasted, and I felt guilty about it. So I ended up, pushing through and pushing through and pushing through, and then by the time I finally did have a job, I was like, I was going through a lot of those symptoms that are very similar to depression. I was also just exhausted all the time. Um, and then the second instance was while I was working. So it was just before I joined Safe in Our World. So I think it was around early 2022. And the job I was in was extremely stressful for a number of different reasons. There was a lot of change happening. There were a lot of things happening that I didn't necessarily agree with on like a personal level as well. And I felt sort of an obligation to keep working because, like, one, I was really passionate about what I did, but two, I was dealing with essentially like people on the other end of my role, like service users, whatever. And I felt, I guess, responsible to push myself further and further and further so that I could help them. Which, obviously I'm not saying that you shouldn't help people, but I think I was doing that to the detriment of myself. And it got to the point where I would get home from work at about 6 or 7 and I would immediately fall asleep. I stopped eating properly. My hair was falling out. I was completely unable to do things like it says on the slide. Like, I lost all interest in my hobbies and interests. I couldn't even watch TV because it felt like too much of an emotional drain. So I would literally come home and just stare at the ceiling until I inevitably fell asleep. I found it so hard to care about anything because every additional piece of input from like socializing, from activities, from anything felt like too much. I can see in the chat that a lot of people are saying that they relate to that, which is unfortunate, but I also think, kind of a good thing that you can recognize that within yourself. One of the things that I always say about burnout that is so frustrating and so sad is that a lot of people won't be able to recognize that they are approaching burnout, unfortunately, until they've gone through it. Which, because I have been skirting around burnout a whole bunch of times before I've actually gone through it, and before I actually learned the terminology for it. And you do just like brush a lot of these symptoms under the rug or away, and you don't really think about them, and you keep like trying to push through, and not taking them seriously. So I suppose the purpose of what Rosie and I are talking about today is to encourage people to take it seriously.
Yeah, and there's no shame in sharing your experiences either. Like, for the longest time, I was so ashamed to mention that when I was burnt out, I relied a lot on alcohol to sleep, to switch off at the end of the day, and it became unhealthy. Um, and it's often also looking at the more like ugly signs of mental health, but also burnout as well. So it's really tricky. I guess you would class it within escapist behaviors in a way, but it's um it's okay to talk about the ones that maybe you feel more not embarrassed by, but just you know, it's rough, but
Yeah.
we'll we're happy to listen to anyone who wants to share their own experiences, and I really appreciate the people who are joining in chat as well.
Yeah, I
Because
can. Oh, sorry, go
oh no,
ahead.
I was just gonna say that's part of why we're doing this, right? Is to have more of a conversation around it than to you and me
Yeah, and
sit and talk about it by ourselves.
right, and to eliminate the stigma, hopefully, of talking about it, we would really hope that, for those of you who are in our Discord, you can see the link there on the screen as well if you're not. But those of you who are in our Discord and who are participating in the Game Dev Champions event, hopefully you feel like you'll be able to talk about these kinds of things with your fellow jammers, and we would certainly encourage that. And we've got a lot of different resources and things that we can signpost to if people need it, throughout the next several months.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're in group settings, to keep an eye on each other as well, not just yourself, and make sure that, there's not someone silently struggling within your team.
Yeah, exactly. I can see someone in the chat said that they realized that over the last few years they realized that they need to absolutely avoid working in startups. It took them 2 instances of burnout across 3 startups to realize that they're not cut out for that environment. And yeah, I think that having that introspection and recognizing those things about yourself that will help you to maintain your well-being and maintain your values. I mean, for me, that was kind of the same situation with my previous job, where it took me going through burnout, but I recognized that I didn't morally feel like it was the job that I should be in. I didn't agree with a lot of what was happening, and that was causing me significant additional stress outside of, like the nature of the job itself. So I think it is really important to have those sort of conversations with yourself, essentially, and figure out what matters to you and what environment you do feel most comfortable working in. I can see a lot of people actually, and there was a comment that just came in about that as well. A lot of people have been saying that they're autistic, and they've been bringing up autistic burnout, and I think that that is a really good point as well. It's something that autistic people are extremely susceptible to. It can happen to other neurodivergent people as well. So, for example, people who have ADHD or people who have both, such as myself. Hi. But autistic burnout refers to essentially the burnout that comes with things like having to mask really often or having to deal with some of the things that make everyday life more stressful for autistic people, like sensory input, like stressful situations around like travel, socializing, work, like all kinds of things. And not making time for the sort of decompression and returning to equilibrium that you do need as an autistic person. I was diagnosed relatively recently, and it's still something that I've been going through, trying to figure out like what exactly my boundaries are, and also trying to like help myself understand that it's okay if I need more rest than a neurotypical person or that I see other people having. It there's so much culturally that says to us that we need to be on all the time, we need to be grinding all the time, working all the time. And you can feel like if you can't keep up with that, it can make you feel like worthless and guilty and all of these horrible things. And it is very difficult to kind of, I suppose, like switch your mindset on that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of practice. And we still struggle with it ultimately. I had a sick day
Yes.
yesterday and I was apologizing, and then I got told off for apologizing. Because it's not, you can't help it. If you're sick, you're sick. You have to take the day, you have to rest and recover. Otherwise, you're just not going to bounce back. It pushing through when you're at that level, and not just obviously in terms of like physical illness. Mushroom shush. I'm talking about important topics. Now I've lost my train of thought, but it's nice to see that a lot of people are really, contributing to this discussion as well. I can see a lot of things. Mushroom, we love you. We do, but now it's not the time to scream directly into the microphone, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, thank you everyone for sharing your experiences in chat and for like being brave enough to be vulnerable about it, honestly. And hopefully hearing other people going through similar things will help you feel a little bit more validated and a little bit supported. I'll just read out a couple more before we move on. So someone said, I had what you would call compound burnout over multiple years, working super hard and doing massive overtime 9 months of the year, and then 3 months of super low productivity and taking my annual leave at the end of the year before I lost it. Employer did not help or care much, so I had to quit. Yeah, I think it's really difficult because I mean, Rosie's, I know, has a lot of thoughts on this, so we'll talk about this a bit later. But so much of our like workplace culture is designed to like idolize overtime and that kind of behavior. So it can be really challenging to get the support you need in workplaces. Which, I mean, that the person whose comment we just read, Rosie and I all quit workplaces because we were unsupported due to burnout, and various things like that. I can see someone else is talking about looking into an ADHD diagnosis because they can relate to what other people have said about symptoms. We obviously, this is a session about burnout, so we're not going to get into it a huge amount, but I do think that it is extremely valuable to learn things about yourself. There's no harm in asking questions and chatting to your GP about it, because as a lot of research is showing us, these types of things have been missed a lot in a huge portion of the population due to lack of research and lack of understanding that has come along a lot in the last few years. But yeah, I think with that we will move on.
Yes, to the best quote.
Yeah, this is something that I've said a lot, I've heard a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people here will recognize both within themselves and within other people, saying, "I'm too busy to burn out. Uh, I'll deal with it after this deadline. I'll just get over this difficult week, and then it will be okay again." In fact, less than a month ago, I think I was in a similar situation, and I ended up taking, I think, like including a weekend, sort of 5 days off work so I could fully decompress, because I was in the same situation. I had a lot of deadlines happening. I had, like other stress from studying and stuff outside of work. And I was skirting burnout. So, and I could see it in myself and I knew it. I spotted the signs, but I just ignored them because I was like, oh, I just need to get past this next busy week and it'll be okay. And then the next week was just as busy. And I was like, I just need to make it to the end of this project and it'll be okay. And it was still busy. And I think ultimately, burnout isn't going to wait for a convenient time to show up. That's not how it works. Your body isn't going to just like sit tight and get you through it and wait until you've got holiday booked or until something's died down to show up, unfortunately. So that's why it's really important to recognize those signs and acknowledge them and take them seriously when they're happening, rather than, I guess, just ignoring them and saying you're too busy and saying you don't have time for it. Because, regardless of what you're working on, nothing is worth your health, and that has to come first.
Yeah, someone's put it very well in the chat, saying that work can wait, but your brain and body cannot. And I
Yeah,
100%
exactly.
agree. There is
Exactly.
nothing more important.
Yeah.
And the work will always be waiting for you when you get back. It's not going anywhere. It'll get done
Yeah.
when it gets done.
Exactly.
And it's really hard to try and put that aside when you're like, oh my God, but especially when it's self-imposed deadlines, I feel like, 'cause you're like, well, I promised myself I'd get it done. I feel like a failure if I don't do it. I'm just going to work through it. And
Yeah.
actually coming to more of a compromise of being like, does it absolutely need to get done today? Is there anything that can push it? Is there anyone I can ask for help with this specific project? Because usually the answer is yes. But it's about being self-aware and figuring out when to allow yourself that break instead of just constantly putting it off.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we move on to the next slide, we can see a few statistics. Now, I'm not going to read them out, and I also feel like a lot of the people in the chat, if that's what we're going off of, don't need more convincing. But if you do, there are some numbers here. I think I'm always in two minds about slides like this, because on the one hand, I really don't think that you should take something so emotive and so nuanced and reduce it down to numbers. But I also feel like sometimes some people need to see the kind of tangible scope, the practical numbers side of things in order to take it seriously. So you can see here that this is such a significant issue. It is impacting so many people worldwide. And the one that I really did want to just talk about here is that first one, where it says 87% of employees feel passion for their job, but 77 still reported burnout. That is something that is, I think, quite unique to the games industry or similar creative industries, whereby people are so passionate about what they do and they love what they do so much that they are willing to put themselves through more and more and more. And it is kind of like I don't know if double-edged sword is the correct saying for this or something like that, but you feel obliged to put in more work because you are doing what you love, and because you're doing what you love, and it's also oftentimes also our hobby, you're just kind of on all the time. Like, you're working games, you're living games, you're playing games in your free time, you're doing all of this, you're talking about games, you're reading news about games, and it's just this mindset of being like always on that can really lead to burnout. I actually just spotted a comment in chat that said, can you get burnt out without actually working that much? I've been studying, but I never do more than 10 to 20 minutes consecutively. Whether I'm doing something or not, I get stressed out about it and I feel too tired and I don't know what it is. I think that in the context of the example that you've given, approaching these tasks when you are already in burnout can lead to things like that. So being like unable to engage without getting stressed, being unable to think about it without getting stressed. But I also think, you can, because, burnout isn't just physically working hard. It's that emotional side of it as well. It's that mental always being on.
Yeah, thinking about work is still work.
Exactly. And even if it's not work, like if you are constantly thinking about, yeah, I mean, right now, like a lot of us are worried about the industry. We're thinking about stuff like that. We're thinking about, for me, certainly some of the things that impact me in my role. I'm sure, Rosie, you're the same. Like it's staying, like having a finger on the pulse to the issues that are impacting people across the games industry. It's seeing all of that stuff coming across social media. It's being unable to engage with anything without thinking, oh, what can I do about this in a work context? Or, oh, that reminds me of this thing that I wanted to work on. Or so a lot of it is a mental thing rather than a physical thing. So I would say absolutely you can be burnt out without actually physically sitting down and, being at your desk or working for like significant amounts of time, basically. I can see a few other comments in the chat, so I'm just going to take a minute to read through some of them. Rosie, I don't know if you've already read any or you had any thoughts on this.
I mean, I definitely have thoughts. I think what you were saying as well about the passion side of things, especially with something like this, is that not only is game dev in itself a very passionate field and people love it for a variety of reasons, but game dev specifically, when looking at personal stories, can become a very emotive subject and something that you probably feel dutiful to complete. And so something like this can actually be quite difficult because you want to do justice to your story or somebody else's story, and it can become very emotionally draining in a way to try and constantly be like, am I doing this right? Have I got this done? Am I going to finish on time? Like all of these things, all these questions, right? And it's quite a big consideration, I suppose, within game jams, but specifically this one. So I hope as well that anyone who is listening is also going to stick around for the more practical advice at the end that can kind of help in these situations, because everyone is vulnerable to burnout. And I think specifically with this one, it might actually be more so potentially, despite the fact that it's 4 or 5 months long. So that was just a thought that I had, not to like scare anyone or anything, but just to try and make sure that you're extra careful in keeping yourself safe and healthy throughout the whole process.
Yeah, well, I can also see that from a lot of people in chat, they have day jobs, they have studies that they're doing. Like, you're not just focusing on this event and developing this game for the next 5 months. You're doing it, in and around and outside of all of your other responsibilities. So I think it is really important to consider your bandwidth. I can see someone in the chat also recommended a book called Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Amelia Nagoski. I've made a note of that. We can pop that into the slide deck that we send out at the end as an extra resource, but really thank you for sharing that. And yeah, a lot of people have said that they relate to that kind of mind racing, unable to switch off kind of situation. And yeah, it's difficult and it's interconnected with so many things, neurodivergence being one of them. I can see someone else said that, because of ADHD, their mind is constantly going literally all the time. I, hard relate to that.
Yes.
And yeah, I can see, yeah, someone else said that burnout feels like a freeze response, like regardless of what I should be doing or what I want to be doing, I'm just so mentally overloaded that the result is me doom scrolling to avoid it all. Yeah, exactly. It's, I was in the same situation where I just physically couldn't do anything. And even thinking about doing something felt like too much. And yeah, someone has just actually put a comment in about recognizing burnout in others, which we will come to talk about in a minute. But now that everyone's sort of shared some of their experiences and started to share I guess like their tips and things, that's a good point for us to move on to the next slide, where Rosie will talk to us about some practical tips for managing and hopefully avoiding burnout.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And I was on Twitter. My mic is very silent. Is it? Oh, I
Or is it my one that is quiet?
I don't think so. I can see it coming through on my screen, but if there is an issue, please do shout about it. I can't see. It's a bit quiet. Who is more quieter, me or Sky? I'll turn myself up if need be. Rosie's a little quiet. Okay, is that better? I've turned myself up. We love technical difficulties during a stream. Perfect. Okay, yay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So yeah, what I was saying essentially is that when it comes to talking about what we can actually do about burnout, it's quite a difficult one because there are so many discussions around burnout that often end with kind of just like, yay, we all shared, we're in this together, and then there's not really much to do from that. And so what we wanted to do is kind of have more tangible takeaways for this. Obviously, this is just a small amount. I've got a whole list of other things that I want to talk about as well. But we've already done the first part, which is talking about it, which is great. But it doesn't just stop here. It's important to keep talking about it, keep sharing, especially to trusted people, and becoming more aware again, as we said, of your own warning signs when it comes to your own burnout. I think it's also important to try, and if you can and feel safe to share this with your team, the people you're working with. They are usually just as invested in your own health as you are and want you to succeed. And so, you can tackle this as a team as well in a way and be able to help, share the workload, and help each other move forwards. The next bit on here, which is talking about creating processes and following them, is one that is almost not as relevant to here, because it's more independent, I suppose, but it's still very valid and can be applicable. What we're talking about is trying to actually stick to what you say. If you say you're going to stop work at 5 o'clock, you stop work at 5 o'clock. You don't just carry on because you're like, well, I'm on a roll, I should do this, I should do this. Actually try and hold yourself accountable for the rules you're trying to stick to be able to keep yourself safe. It's very easy to keep working, especially with something like this when we're enjoying it and we're having fun, but it is still work, even if it's fun. And so by trying to maintain better boundaries with your time away from things, versus your time on the ball, it can help a little bit in terms of avoiding burnout, as well.
I think.
Sorry. You go.
I was just going to say, I think as well on that point, in terms of the game jam specifically, and this event, it would be really worth, when it says creating processes and following them, it'd be really worth from a project management perspective, having a little think about not only, who's doing what and that kind of thing, coming up with timelines for those, but when you are coming up with your timelines, putting in the time and making the effort to think, is this reasonable? What do I have to, how long is this going to take me? And what do I have to balance alongside it? Are there things that are going to be happening in my life that might impact the feasibility of this deadline? What can I do if I need help? And just having those open and honest discussions with the team and making sure that everyone is comfortable with what's being agreed.
Make contingency plans as well. Like if this is the ultimate thing, this is what you all really want to achieve, best case scenario, amazing. But you have to also have plans for if things go wrong, if this doesn't get done, how are you going to adapt that instead of burning yourself out to try and get it perfect? Because ultimately there will be obstacles that happen, unfortunately, in the world of game dev. So, having lots of different alternatives instead of panicking and just continuously working is a great thing that you can do pre-burnout to try and support yourself, but also during burnout as well, if you do find yourself in it. I think of this also, just before we move on, this also applies to teams. So if you are in a group for this event specifically, it might be a good idea to try and get together as a team before all of this starts, if you haven't already started, to establish these rules together, and so that make sure that everyone's on the same page and everybody feels supported and that they can have that clear communication, especially if you don't know the people you're working with, because I know there's quite a few people that are looking to join teams here that are with strangers, which is really cool. And I love seeing that like new collaboration. However, goodbye mushroom. It's good to be able to try and work through it together, because ultimately that's what this is all about. The third point on this is making time for non-work, and that also includes this. This is work, even if it's cool and fun. It is really important to know that, like, whilst we're doing this as a team, the whole point of the game jam, and maybe this sounds bad, but in my opinion, the whole point of the game jam isn't really just about the game you're making. We're here because we all have a shared passion for mental health within game development. And by having this sense of community that we've already started to build within our Discord, which if you haven't joined is on the screen, it's a really powerful way to be able to spend more time with like-minded people and talk about mental health and destigmatize mental health as a whole, regardless of whether you actually make a game or not. So finding time for non-work things is incredibly important. And also when it comes to non-work things, that means nothing to do with what you're working on. So for me, and Sky knows this because I'm actually currently making them a special commission, but I have started crocheting, which I absolutely love. It's got nothing to do with work. It's got nothing to do with games. Usually I do sometimes make game related crochet, but I don't think that counts. And it's something to completely take my mind off everything else that's going on. And it's meant to do that. It's picking out a hobby that is deliberately drawing your brain away from other things. Sky, I don't know if you've got any that you're currently working on. Like, well, not working on hobbies, but you know what I mean? Like anything you've picked up that's nothing work related.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, this is really bringing out like the old person in me, but I've started doing crosswords, like in a physical crossword book.
I love a crossword. We're in good company. It's fine.
Well, I find that it's really good because it engages my brain enough that I'm not at the risk of having a thought, basically.
Yeah.
But it's also not screen time, because I find that so many of my hobbies involve some sort of screen. And so I wanted to have something that could consciously like let me step away. I'm also constantly picking up new craft related hobbies and invariably not following them through. But one of the ones that I'm doing at the moment is needle felting. I've just started giving that a go. Again, just something that is not screen related. And I'm trying to build in more activities like that into my routine. So whether it is like just making time to go out on a walk or go like explore something, or like even just like walk around town and window shop and not really do anything else, just stuff that makes me go somewhere else.
Yeah, I think
I can see
hobbies that I was just gonna say the same thing. Like hobbies that actually get you outside of the house are really great, even if it's not for very long. Like just finding something that's, it doesn't even need to be a hobby. Like sometimes if I'm having one of those days, I will force myself to go out and get a fancy coffee. Because I'm like, it gets me out the house. It's 20 minutes of walking. I get a treat at the end of it. It's great. It's all good things. And I'm away from my desk and I don't have to think about screens and things, you know? So
I've just been walking around like car boot sales, or if you're in the US, like a yard sale, or whatever you would call it. And just, yeah, doing little things like that. I can see a lot of people have said things about board games as well. I'm a massive board game fan.
I love board games and
And
jigsaws. I tried to do a jigsaw yesterday. It was a Planet Zoo one. Again, it's a kind of game themes, but not really. I spent about 2 hours and I just gave up, but I had a great time. Like, I didn't finish
yeah,
it, but the process was nice.
yeah,
Why
and
don't you
D
talk about your experiences for 2 minutes while I lock them out because I can hear Mushroom screaming constantly and I fear it's a bit distracting.
I'm happy to do that. That's fine.
1 second. Sorry,
Um,
folks.
yeah, I can see Dr. Ferret's put in the chat that they're playing so much D&D. Yeah, I think that my weekly D&D sessions are like, even though I do play online, so I'm still at my PC, it's like a really good opportunity to just switch off from work stuff, and do something different and something that is quite like creative and a little bit like, I suppose, outside of my everyday comfort zone. Because I'm not, much of like a theatre-y type, role-play-y type person normally. But I do enjoy having that opportunity to see that side of myself, like once a week. And yeah, I can see other people are talking about like different communities that they're part of. So theatre, going to see plays and musicals, joining different communities on Reddit and Discord. Um, someone saying that they would sell their soul for board games. Um, yeah, I'm really pleased to see that people are sharing a lot of their different hobbies and stuff like that. And yeah, someone else said that the social aspect of D&D is really helpful as well. And yeah, you're right. Especially if you're coming into this event as like a solo dev, it could become quite an isolating experience. So building in that sociability time, time to talk to people, is really beneficial. And I guess the only like caveat I would add to all of this is going back to, again, like what it says on the slide there, making time for it. Because we can have all of these hobbies, we can have so many things, but we can still be susceptible to those being like the first things that we drop when stuff gets busy and stuff gets difficult. So I think trying to build that into your planning process, to your schedule, putting it in your calendar if you need to. I have a standing, like, recurring appointment in my work calendar toward the end of the day where I just do like a self check-in basically and just take a few minutes to reflect on my day and how I'm feeling. I can see some other people have said like meditation is helpful for them as well, but I find that if I don't have the reminders for me to do that stuff, I will just forget.
I'm the same with taking lunch breaks, which is really simple and basic. But I have a standing hour in my calendar every day to be like, take lunch, like actually go and do something away from your
Yeah.
screen. And it's helpful because it can be really like, I'm a very forgetful person and also I just get distracted really easily. So having something to be like, do it now, this is your allocated time. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, I haven't worn it in ages, but I had like one of those like pedometer watchy type things that would vibrate and yell at me if I went an hour without standing up and walking around. So I've been thinking like I should probably dig that out and wear it again because it was really helpful because sometimes, especially if you're really working hard on something, especially because I have ADHD and a tendency to kind of hyper focus and get really, really absorbed in something, it can be hours and hours and hours, and then I realize that I've not had anything to drink, I've not had anything to eat, I've not been to the toilet, I've not sat up from my like hunched over position
Yep.
in hours and hours. So setting in reminders like that, or just like putting an alarm on your phone to go off every now and then to remind you to just get up and stretch, is really useful. Yeah.
So moving forward as well, because we talked a bit more broadly about what we can do, but specifically what can we do as individuals when we're in this game jam, we wanted to give some more advice for how to manage burnout, prevent it, but also, if it does happen, what you can do to support yourself. We've talked about it already about spotting the signs, but like we've said, becoming more aware of what your own warning signs are when you're getting close to burnout. It can be really helpful. For me, I've actually got and Sky as well. We talk about this all the time. We've got personal Discord servers in which we put, well, I think you do, Sky. Yeah, but we have personal Discord servers where there's different channels for different things. One of them is like celebrations and things, but it's not what I'm actually talking about today. This one is a journal. And so even just documenting really quickly, like what I've done, how I'm feeling about it, where my energy is at on a level of 1 to 10, it can be really helpful to see a slow decline if you are struggling consistently, to become more aware and figure out what you're going to do to try and get those levels back up, because it can be really hard to dig yourself out of burnout, and it can be a very long healing and recovery process once you're in it. So doing everything you can to protect yourself and prevent this happening is so vital. The second one, asking for help, again, it sounds easy. It's not always easy. It's actually really difficult, especially in something like this that comes from a passion project. It's something that you, especially if you're a solo developer, trying to ask for help in situations like this can feel like failure. It can feel like you're not doing everything you can. And it's just not true. We all need help. In everything that we do a lot of the time, and there's no shame in asking for it, and we've got a whole community of people who you can ask for support, whether that's just a bit of friendly advice, whether or not someone's able to give you some more personal time to talk about whatever your issues are. But there's so many different things you can try and do to get some more external support. And that goes as well, obviously, to more professional services as well. If it gets to the point where you are really struggling and you'd like to talk to a professional, that's good. That's fine. You can do that as well. These are all options for you, and there's loads of different ones that we also have on our website, which I'm sure Sky can put in the chat as well, where we have our local helplines. But there's so many different ways to reach out to people instead of just calling your doctor. You can talk to your loved ones, your family, your friends, fellow game devs, the Safe and Owl community, professionals. There's so many different people you can try and go to. And learning when to ask for help and knowing to do it is just as valuable a lesson as actually doing it, because recognizing you need help is bloody difficult sometimes. So yeah. I think that's an important one.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just put the link in chat to our Find Help page. I'll also pop it in the Discord server in the resources section and pin it so that it's easy to find. But if you go to that page, you will find helplines and crisis lines in over 100 different countries. It will detect your location and default to stuff that's available to you locally, but you can also filter it and look in different locations. And you can search by like different symptoms and specifications to find essentially like the right person for you to call. But all of that stuff is kept up to date and is designed to be as easy for you to find what you need as possible. So if you are in a point where you are worried about your well-being, then that would be my recommendation for a first port of call to reaching some support and someone, sort of a trained professional to speak to, basically, I suppose. I also think when it comes to spotting the signs, it's, in as much as you feel comfortable to do so, it can be really useful to share those signs with other people. I think that I've worked with Rosie closely enough and long enough now that we're really good at being able to tell the little nuances in each other's like tone and demeanor and the way that we behave, that we know if something's not right. But if you're new to working with people, then that won't be the case. I know a lot of people in this game development event are joining teams with other jammers who they may not know outside of this and may not have worked with before. So I think having that kind of openness and that opportunity to share, like, hey, this is how I normally prefer to communicate. This is, how I normally like to work. And if, I'm doing this kind of stuff, it might mean that I'm not doing super well. Or if I am experiencing something, I will let you know. Or I might want to step away, and just like having those really open conversations about who you are, what it looks like when you're doing well, what it looks like when you're not doing so well. can really help other people to spot the signs in you, and help people to advocate for you, which is the next one that Rosie's going to talk us through, I think.
Yeah, of course. And it leads in quite nicely as well from what we were just talking about. One of the things that we've shared before, and I'll put it in the Discord if I can find it, but it's essentially a safety plan that you can create if you know that you're particularly vulnerable to burnout and to struggles and mental health issues, and you know that there's certain signs that you're willing to share with other people, and then there's certain things that make you feel better. It's basically just like a really easy document that you can pull together to share with people, maybe your teammates, maybe friends and family, to be like, hey, here's a guide to my burnout, and this is how you can help me should I get there. Because it's very easy to forget those things, or forget to share them, or whatever it is, right? I'm also trying to keep up with chat 'cause there's a lot of really interesting stuff going in there at the moment. So people are talking about joining Discord communities. Another great place to advocate for others. Intergames is a great place. I don't know Game Dev Local, but by all means, there are so many really wonderful games communities out there, especially those more targeted towards marginalized communities. There's a mentorship program that we recommend called Limit Break Mentor, which Sky's now part of. And I'm sure they talk about it more, but it's essentially helping marginalized genders who are getting into the games industry, or just joining the games industry, or have been in the games industry a long time, who want to mentor, share their knowledge, but also get support from each other. So that's a great resource as well. I'd really recommend getting involved if you are interested in that. I have a whole list of things that I wanted to share as well. So it's kind of pointed already at in there, but saying no, really a hard thing to do, especially if you're a chronic people pleaser like me. But it's actually something that is so necessary, especially when you're taking on a massive project like this, to be realistic about what you can achieve, to be realistic about where your limits are, and to ultimately be brave enough to say no to people, whether that's no to your teammates if they're asking too much of you, whether it's no to your job for pushing you too hard, like whatever it might be. And there's so many different variations of saying no. It's important to consider it as a response instead of being like, I'll just take it on, I'll do it, I don't want anyone to feel bad. It's not a valid enough excuse if it's going to be a detriment to your mental health. So saying no is important, but also saying yes is important when it comes to good things. And I say that, I know it sounds silly, but when I'm in a state of burnout or having a really low mental health period, I will say no to everything, including the things that will make me feel better, because I want to isolate myself. And so sometimes forcing yourself to leave the house, whatever you're working on, the project, and actually go and do something that you know ultimately will make you feel better, like spending time with friends. I'm the first one to be like, oh, I'm kind of tired, I don't know, self-care, I'll stay at home. And actually, it's not for me, it's just me isolating myself, and it's time to recognize that. So it's obviously different for everybody, but that can be something you can think about as well. We've already talked about communicating with your team. Another one that I think is a good one to regularly build into your routine is changing up your environment, like your physical environment. And making, if you are spending a lot of time at your desk, making that physical environment nice to be existing in. It's very easy to just, throw a PC against a wall, and it's a very sad little corner that you end up resenting. But ultimately, if you have a lot of things that are joyful and make you happy around you, it can be a nicer place to work and a nicer place to feel like you're being productive and looking after yourself. And as someone who has their desk in their living room, because I don't have a dedicated office, that's become a very important part of my day. It's like I've got plants around me. I've got little crocheted things, like little frogs, like just stuff that I'm like, yeah, it's cute. I like it. I want to see it every day. Nice things. I've got fidget toys for when I'm on calls and I get stressed and I don't know what to do with my hands. I have things like this that are on my desk, like things that are very easy to help in like a short-term level, but also just make you feel more at peace when you are working, I think is an important one. Sky, I don't know if you had any that you wanted to talk about. I know I'm talking a lot.
No, I mean, I think you're making really good points, and I was just having a read in the chat as well. I mean, firstly, thank you all for the kind of conversations you're having. I can see a lot of people sort of replying to each other and recommending things and trying to help out, and I really love to see that. Um, and I can see other people who are, thinking about actively looking into different programs and things. Someone said that their family has encouraged them to seek counselling and that talking really helps. And I absolutely agree. I think it is important to acknowledge that while we're saying that you should talk to like your fellow teammates and your friends and things about how you're feeling, and that is absolutely true, that it's also important to acknowledge that these people are not sort of trained clinical professionals. So just keep in mind that safeinourworld.org/find help or other local support if you are in a position where you really need to talk to someone kind of clinical, someone professional, or if you are in a period of crisis. I also saw someone say that they should look up if there's a limit break or similar thing in Sweden. I think they might not be games industry specific, but a lot of places will have like local or online mentoring options for a little bit more like generalist mentoring. But it's also, highly likely that there are people across the industry who want to enter into like more more informal mentoring arrangements. So like it's worth sort of asking and chatting to people that because I guess a lot of people do fall into that kind of mentoring relationship without it being through like an official program or something.
Yeah.
My partner has just come in with my cat wearing the stupidest cone ever. Can you give him to me? I was like trying so hard to keep a straight face during what I was talking.
Oh
Look
my
at the
goodness.
watermelon boy. Oh, he doesn't want to be here.
Oh, he's
I'm sorry,
furious.
baby. He doesn't like it.
It has a cat on it. It sure does.
Oh, you look so silly.
That's
That
brilliant.
was my boy Zuko. Um,
Yeah, we're a very
he's
cat-oriented team here, unfortunately. So if you're not a cat person,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. Well,
Um,
I think taking time out to hang out with pets is another
that
really,
was one of the ones I had on my list.
yeah,
Pets. I was
it's a
actually
really good
looking up
one.
dog therapy. Like there are things that they're like places. It sounds really sketchy. There are centres in across the UK, at least. I'm sure there are places everywhere that have like sessions so you can come in and just pet dogs, or you can do yoga and pet dogs, or you can just do anything, or cats. There's cat cafes everywhere. There's so many access to pets. If you don't have one at home, borrow a pet. There's one called Borrow My Dog or something. You can take other people's dogs for a walk. Things like that. Really silly, but like I love it. I think it's really great. It's a really nice way to get involved with
Yeah.
animals, especially if you don't have one.
In our Discord server as well, there is a channel specifically dedicated to pictures of animals. It is not specific to people who are participating in the Game Dev Champions event. There are like specific channels for that event in the Discord, but our Discord in general is for anyone in the games industry and wider community. So if you do have pets, or if you see cool animals, then we're always very happy to see those pictures and share them in the Discord.
I
You'll be able
saw
to see all my babies in there all the
Oh yeah,
time.
we share them all the time. I've also seen Moom, hi Moom, who've
Oh,
said that
hello.
they've done dog therapy during exam season. So this particular company as well also
So
does it for
cool.
workplaces. So if you've got any standing or influence within the people you work with who might have opportunity to do that, rally for it, because maybe they'll let you do it, because they bring in like a playpen and everything, and it just sounds like pure joy. So
Yeah.
ultimately there's so many different things, right, that we could do to relieve stress and try and take a break from everything that you're doing. And there's
Mhm.
probably so much more, and it's all very circumstantial. Like there are things I would suggest for people who are working, if it's burnout in a more professional setting, like what you can try and do from your employer's perspective. But again, it's quite different because this is a game jam that is outside of a corporate setting. So it's kind of hard to apply those in some ways. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can look at. The only
I
other one, oh,
oh
sorry,
sorry.
you go.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, the only other thing I was going to actually mention, I know that we're running out of time, so I'll keep this short, was about like the heroics of this, and in working in general. And what I mean by that is really praising people and building people up who are working an unhealthy amount of hours, unsustainable amount of hours, and doing an unsustainable amount of work, because while they're a hero, they're just so great. Aren't they doing amazing? Isn't this wonderful? No, it's not wonderful, actually. It's really damaging. And it's a culture that we are desperately trying to stamp out at Safe in Our World, because it sets a precedent for everybody to be overworking or you're useless, essentially. I hate the culture. I think it's really terrible. I've had it before in previous jobs. And what we want to try and do is set the example for ourselves, people in this championship or champions event, but also within the teams as well. It shouldn't be something that you're, celebrating if you're like, I worked 23 hours out of my 24-hour day today working on the game jam. That's not good. And it's not sustainable. You need to take breaks. It's human to take breaks. And you can't expect everybody to work at the same standard as each other. It just doesn't work that way. So I think it's really important as well to celebrate taking breaks, celebrate actually looking after yourself and taking care of yourself. One that we talk about, and we talked about recently at the BAFTA event, is leaving loudly and being open when you're, especially if you're in a position of influence above other people in your team, for example. Telling people, I'm finished for the day, I'm done. You should too. Let's all get some rest. Let's, encourage each other to take care of each other, essentially. And I think that's something I'd quite like to leave it on. I don't know if you had anything to add, Sky.
No, I think that's a really good finishing point. I also really appreciate that you brought up acknowledging that your bandwidth might be different from someone else's. So just because you are capable of working an 8-hour day, for example, doesn't mean that everyone is. And we shouldn't be, saying that one way is right and one way is not right. And then I also think that someone in the chat made a great point that working more isn't always efficient. And yeah, you're right. You could achieve more by doing less a lot of the time. I'll just quickly, I can see there's one quick question about the BAFTA talk, so I'll answer that before we wrap up the session. The talks from our Games Mental Health Summit in partnership with BAFTA are going to be made available on YouTube. The talks, at least, that were delivered in the theatre. Those we'll post about it on our socials when they're up. I don't know exactly what the time frame will be, because it will just be about like editing and getting them on there. For the talks that were in the workshop room, they weren't recorded, but there are going to be actions from them that will be published on either our website or BAFTA's website. So again, if you just keep an eye on our website and socials, you'll be able to find all of that stuff.
Yeah, it'll be on the BAFTA YouTube channel. I think we'll probably try and get it on ours as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the next slide is literally just the thank you slide.
It is just a thank you slide, but we'll put it up anyway for formality. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for participating in this event. It's our first time running anything like this, so also thank you for being patient with us as we kind of figure things out, and we try and, answer your questions and hopefully give you a good experience of this. We will put this recording up on our YouTube channel for those who couldn't make it or those who want to revisit it, and we'll link to that as soon as possible. We will also make the slide deck from this session available in the Discord, and at the end we've got links to further resources, further reading, and other bits and pieces that you'll be able to access through there. But yeah, just a massive thank you to everyone for being so open and for sharing, and for coming up with so many great pieces of advice and uplifting each other, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
That's such a nice message. I'm gonna cry. You're so lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, thank you so much, everyone. We'll be in the Discord.
Bye. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.